You have launched a new flavor, maybe you have reformulated it, but it's not moving off the shelf the way you expected. And the reorders from direct consumers or buyers aren't just coming. You've looked at the price, the marketing, the packaging, the communication, the message, but what is the problem starting long before any of that? Today I want to show you why most food product flavor briefs go wrong before development even begins. If you're new here, hello, I'm Galizzi, a food scientist and a flavor expert. I've been working for over 10 years in the food industry. I've been trained in a flavor house for years and I work with brands like McVitie. The Food Lab podcast is where I talk honestly about what it actually takes to build a food and drink brands that stay on retailers' shelf. When I talk to food and drink founders or when I work with my clients, there is usually a question I like to ask. It's a very simple question, but most of the time it tells me a lot about why a launch didn't work. Why or how did you choose this flavor? So most of the time I will have something along the lines of it feels premium, it feels clean, it's natural, is sophisticated, it's on trend, it fits our brand, everyone in the team loved it, but none of the answer actually give me really a response of the question I ask. Because the question is not why this flavor fits your brand vision. It's more why did you choose it for your target consumers? And there is a difference between the two, a gap if you want. And that gap is the problem of why so many food and drink products fail on the market. Remember what I said in one of the previous episodes, 76% of new product launch in the UK fail the first year. So basically, most of the food and drink brands choose the flavor direction based on what they want the product to represent. So premium, sophisticated, bold, natural, on trend. But that's more brand positioning. And of course, it matters even when you select the flavors. You don't necessarily want to have a product that shouts naturality and clean label and have a flavor profile that's really artificial. So you have to take that into account, but I think the flavor direction and the flavor strategy you have to adopt needs to be a little bit more nuanced and also purpose-led. Let me explain. Before you start asking what flavor fit your brand, you need to ask yourself, what does my consumer actually need from this product at a flavor level? What problem the flavors are trying to solve? What experience are the consumers looking for? And is the flavor direction we have selected is heading in that direction? Let me give you an example, and something that I mentioned before was when I worked for a client on their marine collagen. They came with a clear flavor brief. They wanted the flavors to be sophisticated, botanicals, elegant, premium. When I saw the brief, I just thought that is quite thorough. Clearly fit their brand image, but I was also a little bit concerned about the product that again tasted fishy and musty. So as you can imagine, it was quite a challenging product to work with and mask this off note. Before I worked on this product, they had a lot of consumers complain, very, very harsh ones. People try this product in a lot of applications to try to get rid of the base. So they thought maybe mixing it with coffee or tea, something that is very strong, will mask the fishy notes. And I knew from experience it would not. And the consumers clearly said it did not. Consumers try it in juices. So basically the consumer in their consumer testing were trying different applications to finally get rid of these musty notes. So what I made them clear was until we solve these flavor notes, all of these off notes, we will not be able ever to achieve this, because this is what the consumer test is telling you. And consumer tests, they've done quite few, and every single run of consumer test said exactly the same thing. People just want to be able to drink it and have something that is pleasant, that tastes good. Because again, it's a product that you are supposed to drink every day. So the only thing that consumers wanted was to get rid of this fishy and musty note. That was it. You see the difference between their brand image and how they wanted to vehiculate that through the product and the reality of what their product tasted like, but also what their consumers wanted. And both things can be true at the same time. You can have something that is premium and sophisticated in your positioning and have a brief that solves a consumer's problem. I'll give you another example. I'm still working on a vegan omega-3 and the customer had a spearmint, but a very strong spearmint. It was so cooling. It was the same feeling as when you brush your teeth and you have this cooling and menthol in your mouth for a long time. So it's quite hard to actually have food or drink afterwards. And they realized that even though the product sales were good, a lot of consumers were actually complaining about this menthol effect. So they were happy that the fishy notes were gone. So they never really complained about that for the minty one, but they complained about the lingering effect of this spearmint and the cooling effect. So most of their consumers were taking this vegan omega-3 in the morning. So it was a liquid one, taking it out of the fridge with the pipette, few drops on your tongue, and off they go. But they were so cooling, they were complaining at the fact that they couldn't have breakfast afterwards. They couldn't have a coffee afterwards because this menthol was so lingering for hours that they just wanted to get rid of it. So here, the problem that these consumers had, they wanted a flavor that was not as lingering as this one. So they could have their breakfast, their coffee, and carry on their day. Now, if you're already selling few SKUs, there is definitely something to look at. If you have few flavor SKUs, you probably will have some bestsellers, some flavors that sell more than the others. And again, be careful when I say bestsellers, for me, will be flavors that have a high repeat purchase rate. So you have a lot of consumers that keep on buying your product. Rather than, don't think that a bestseller is the one that sells the most if people buy it only one. I know this is a mistake that I hear a lot with food and drink founders. So when I say bestseller, always look at the repeat purchase. So the flavor, they are so good that people keep on buying it. Bestseller for me, again, is not a product that a lot of people buy once and then they are disappointing and they're like, oh, it doesn't taste good, and then never buy it again. That is not a bestseller. Anyway, so you have a bestseller flavor with a lot of repeat purchase, and some of the other flavors that you have a very low repeat purchase or overall sale. In that scenario, it's exactly the same product. Sorry, I should have said this is exactly the same product, but you have different flavor variations. Okay? This is the perfect example of telling you that there are some issues with some of the flavors because the packaging is the same, the messaging is the same, it's exactly the same or similar product, only the flavors are different. So it's telling you that some flavors you have succeeded well, some flavors are not working. So that, for example, tells you a little bit more about the mind and the palate of your target consumers. Okay, so in our scenario, you have different flavor variation. Some of them are not working, and now you are in the process of changing the flavor completely or trying to improve the flavors. And there is something that I always advise my client to do is to do a consumer testing before you start any new product development or brief any suppliers or contract manufacturer. But I'm not talking about the classic consumer testing where you ask consumers on paper what type of flavors they would like to see in your product. Okay, I saw that at McVitie's. They spend thousands of pounds for this consumer testing, and every single test, it was always the same answer. Whatever product it was, of course, it was more fruity for Jaffa Cake than it was for chocolate hobnob and chocolate digestive, but the answers were always the same. So if we take chocolate hobnob and chocolate digestive, the answer of which flavor would you like to see in your next chocolate hobnob or chocolate digestive, they were always the same. Always, always. It was just always a variation of chocolate. So chocolate brownie, chocolate fudge cake, a variation of caramel, again, salted caramel ice cream, or a variation of vanilla, like crème brûlée, for example. And then I watched the product development team try to fit some of these flavors, making them somehow different from the previous consumer taste or the previous launch, and without any success. And then at the end, it was just, no, the flavor is not working. Let's try again. Let's try new flavors. It was a colossal waste of time and money for everyone. And that was at McVitie's level. So what I actually recommend my clients to do is actually understanding their palate. Because if you just ask someone what would be the next chocolate digestive that you want to see, what would be the next flavors you want to see in my product, especially if it comes from a list and they have to select, they always gonna go for their comfort zone. They're always gonna go for flavors that are familiar and flavors they like. But it doesn't mean that it's gonna fit your product, your target consumers, or your brand. What you want instead is asking questions around their habits in terms of food and drink. What sort of food and drink do they buy in your category, but also in general? What sort of flavors are they attracted to? I don't know, when it comes to crisps. What brands do they choose when it comes to chocolate? What sort of takeaway do they have on a regular basis? What restaurants do they go to on a regular basis? What sort of product or brand would they choose for celebrations to offer to someone? So these little nuances will actually tell you if they like something very classic or something very bold. Maybe they love trying new flavors. Maybe they are actually bored of the category. The category have always the same flavors. I don't like this type of flavors. I'm looking for something new. Or the opposite. This category tastes always so artificial. I wish that could be something that tasted more natural. And that's why you really have to do, so you can do focus group on those, but you really have to select the people that are your target consumers. Again, there is no point of doing a focus group with a lot of random different people that are outside of your demographics. So not only you can understand a little bit more what they can expect from the category that you're on, what things they like on that category, what things they don't like about the category. So for example, is it too artificial? Is it always the same boring flavors? I wish that can be something new. Or if it's too artificial, I wish there was something natural. Or is it, I like this category because it's always the same classic flavors, whatever the format of the snack is always, I don't know, cheese and onion, for example. So I like it's a classic flavor. It's the same as when I was a teenager and eating it. You understand their habits, their palate. What are they attracting to when they do their shopping, when they go to restaurants? Again, do they want something that is very classic? So you can even ask them if they go for a curry on a weekly basis, ask them Do you always take the same thing on the menu? Or do you like selecting new things? Again, he's trying to understand if they are more adventurous or if they like more classic things. And I will give you an example. I worked for a client on their pre-workout. When we looked at the pre-workout category, all of the flavors were in your face, very strong, very confectionery, very, very artificial, and even the colors look like from another planet. When we work with these athletes and do a sort of collaboration between my client and them, they wanted something that was completely different, actually, from the category. So all of the flavor workshop were mainly based on confectionery product. Cherry cola, bubble gum, blue raspberry, you name them. But there was also some fruity and juicy element. And that athlete was thinking that actually do something different from the category. And my client actually agreed with him. It's not because your category is doing a certain type of flavor that you have to do exactly the same, as long as it's backed up by what your target consumers want. And in that case, it really fitted what the consumers of my client actually wanted. They actually were fed up and didn't buy pre-workout beforehand because of all of the very artificial and confectionery flavor profile. But when we've created this much more juicy and natural pre-workout, that was clearly a gap in the market and their consumers actually wanted it. So all of these things to say, do not base your flavor direction on assumption. Actually ask your target consumers these kind of questions to understand what is their need and their expectations around flavors. The question is not, would you like a blue raspberry or a cherry cola in the next pre-workout? The questions for this time of focus group is more, what do you buy when it comes to pre-workout? And if you don't buy a pre-workout, is there any reason? What do you think of the category? What could you change if you could? And listen very carefully to all of these answers. Right, here is your challenge for this week, and it's quite a straightforward one. Look at your current flavor range or the next launch you are planning. For each flavor you have chosen or each direction you're considering, ask yourself one honest question. Do I have actual evidence that my target consumers want this specific flavor? Not evidence that on paper, yes, they will buy it. Yes, they consider cherry in my product. Yes, it fits the brand positioning. But evidence that the people I'm building these products for will choose it again and again, because it's a much deeper psychological level on why they usually choose a product, if that makes sense. If the answer is no, you know what to do. Either you ask your current target consumers or you create a focus group with your target consumers and ask these questions. Flavors are always more complex than we think. Decisions around them don't have to be. When you put things in perspective, it's really just asking the right questions to your target consumers. What does my consumers actually need from this product is first. And then how can I go through my brand image? Does it fit my product? All of this come after. If you want to go deeper on how you actually fix your food product flavor brief and ground it in real consumer insight, this is exactly what I do at EP29. The link is in the description. If this episode was useful, please share it with a founder who is about to launch a new flavor or revamp their current one. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye!